let's do one more. Yeah. So let's go for Matt. You've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you. Daniel, it's a real pleasure. I was curious about what you were saying earlier about institutional capture, and you had mentioned autopoiesis a couple of times. So I was wondering if the complexities that you were talking about in institutions could be dealt with better if we applied sort of like a biological metaphor, looking at the institutions as like autonomous systems, and then perhaps as capture as a type of homeostasis, or sorry, as a breaking of homeostasis. And I was wondering if you could riff a little bit on that, because I know that we have, complex systems oftentimes when they come together can actually become computable again at different layers of description. So a body might be incredibly complex, but talking about an individual person, for example, is a lot easier. It has different rules at the higher level domain than the lower, but it's easier to make sense, about that higher level domain than it is to just look at the lower level stuff. So is the complexity in institutions, is that something that we could make some headway on with the biological metaphor, or is that taking metaphor too far?
Yes, I believe so, and not perfectly. The reason that Dave Snowden made the distinction of anthro-complexity is the idea that humans actually behave pretty differently than termites and pretty differently than molecules in a cell. And so the idea that you're going to model human systems based on termites using stigmergy, or based on just molecular dynamics creating cells, like you're kind of missing. Like at each layer, there's emergence of new capacities, and so there's new types of complexity. So the humans are actually doing abstraction and forecasting into the future to make decisions now that are then, and then watching each other do that, and then finding shelling points. Termites aren't doing that, right? And so you can't just say we're going to reduce human systems to stigmergetic process or some other kind of biologic, but that doesn't mean that those don't inform it. They inform it, but you have to look at what is the appropriate order of complexity. And I really like Dave's work for that purpose. This is actually one of the reasons I like holochain, is it is a different type of chain structure than a blockchain, that rather than have a universal state computer where there's one timeline, it has a bunch of distinct, separate, simultaneous timelines, and it's a bottom-up process, and they achieve Byzantine fault tolerance and anti-fragility, not through one state reconciliation, but through local processes that are much more like how a complex rather than a complicated system happens. And whether their technology will end up working or not, I don't know, but the theory informing it is much richer. It's also one of the reasons I like DAO Stack, Maton's project, is because it's working on how to make generalized DAOs, and how do we create the right modular process for a decentralized autonomous organization that is complex, self-organizing, and yet has a kind of modular rule base that allows both the flexibility and simplicity of build process. I think these are both early technologically, but like working in the right directions. And I would like a lot more people working in those directions. I think when you think about living systems, you see that there are some living systems that kind of regenerate for a very long time, and other ones that die and are reborn, and they regenerate at a species rather than an individual level. A mycelial network or a aspen grove might be regenerating over a long fucking period of time. And so parts are dying, new parts are coming in. That's one kind of system. Whereas with the ants, it's dying off and new ones, dying off new ones, right? So you have to kind of look at which model. So in one of them, we say all institutions should have shelf lives. They should self-terminate and then new ones be built, because then they don't go through decay and capture, and they don't start to get vested interests around their own continuation over the specific fit for purpose application that they came for, because in 20 years, we might not need that purpose. There might be better ways of doing it. So this is why the Consilience project had a 5-year time to live, has a 5-year time to live, and it will self-destruct at that point, or it will close. And then we'll see what needs to be done next. But it was to ensure that there would be no vested interest for long-term careerism or ladder climbing or position in the power landscape. It was where we have a maximum pressure to get as much done in a finite time period, where we're going to do a public post-mortem on where we succeeded and failed. So all of our incentive is to be able to succeed because it's transparent, and we can't have a vested interest to compete with anybody else, because our long-term effect will only happen by helping lots of other groups that continue after us. And I think that example of a self-terminating system like that can be very, very good. Of course, other times you're building institutional knowledge and capacity. It's expensive and hard. You don't want to fucking lose it. And so then you have to say, how do I prevent capture? And then the hard part, how do I prevent capture? How do I prevent institutional decay across generational transfer? As the needs of the world change, as the fit for purpose changes, and as the people who built it that were conditioned by a particular time change and their kids were conditioned differently, or the next generations are. So this is like Baudrillard dynamics and Strauss-Howe dynamics of institutional decay. Samo Borja writes on this quite well. He's in the Consilience Project. So we both want to create systems, but so then it's not that it's going to maintain itself, it's that it's going to keep regenerating itself to be newly fit for purpose, right? So it's continuously reassessing its own axioms and rebuilding itself aligned with it, with the new needed axioms. This is really key. So what new technologies, what new values, what new contexts? If it tries to maintain the original fit for purpose in an evolving environment, it will become bad, at least useless. So those are two different approaches where the fit for purpose has a time that you can forecast its utility, you kill it within that time, or it has a process of self-evolution built into it that goes all the way down to the core axioms of the system, and then has checks and balances to look for where corruption and capture and all like that would occur. And the incentives are really key, right? The whole, like, let's say that I create an institution to solve a problem, and now I have power being in that institution. I never want to solve the problem, because as soon as I fully solve the problem, I've obsoleted myself and I lose all the power. And so I want to maintain the problem forever while maintaining that I'm the only institution that can manage it, and I get more power by ongoing management of the ongoing manufactured problem. Well, that's fucked up, right? So we have to say, okay, no, the moment the problem's gone, this institution either kills itself or it transitions to new kinds of problems or new kinds of innovation or opportunity. Or we have to be able to say, how do we separate the vested interests of the people who are in it from the purpose of the institution itself? So these are all deep considerations in the next phase of institutional design.
Could I draw from that if you were to nail down all the right incentive structures and all the right decentralized technology and everything like that? I mean, I hadn't even considered your idea about something coming to a natural end, right? Because normally when you think, oh, we're going to create a technology that's going to solve this problem, you want to hang on to it for as long as possible. But does, even if you nailed everything else, does just the dynamics of these systems over generations, like you're saying, guarantee that the only way for success is to refresh, have a phoenix type of situation?
Yes. Whether refreshes kill the whole institution or not, or it's updated appropriately and ensure that the process for update can occur. The best thinking and the best technology and the context of the time is going to change. And all institutions know that, so they update themselves, but usually not at a deep enough level. So the question is the level of depth and the process by which that occurs. If you haven't read Baudrillard Simulation and Simulacrum, the layers of civilizational decay from these kind of Baudrillard processes, it's worth looking at, because the institutions were usually formed by people that understood why the previous institutions failed and sucked, and why we had to do some new harder thing and work their ass off to do some new super hard thing. And then a generation or a couple generations in, you have people who have benefited from everything working, don't have that knowledge and don't have the embodied knowledge or capacity. So then they take as doctrine, they didn't have the generator function that made it, right? So now they hold the Constitution as doctrine in the way the founding fathers didn't. They held it as a living thing they were generating, and they could keep regenerating it. So if you pass on the result of the generator function of people who knew how to appropriately innovate, then even if they're intending to hold it well, they don't understand what gave rise to it well enough to keep updating it appropriately. That ends up leading to places where the lack of ability to update can be corrupted. Oh, we can take advantage of this. So now anyone that has a predatory impulse realizes they can actually do it because nobody knows how to update the thing appropriately. And then that leads to a corruption and decay process. So we have to keep it passing on not just knowledge that was figured out, but the capacity for knowledge generation, right? Passing on the generator function of the knowledge creation.
Keeping in mind that the generator function may have different results in different contexts as well.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And I do have to wrap at this point, but
Yeah,
Alex,
no worries. We're
been
going to
really
wrap it up.
fun.
So yeah, thank you so much, Daniel, as always. Yeah, real pleasure and really enlightening as well. So in typical fashion, just invite everyone to unmute and say a thank you to Daniel and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.